So here's a problem that you can probably relate to, right? So when you were young, you probably heard a lot of aphorisms about being yourself, right? Like, be yourself, everybody else is taken, right? Like, don't try to be someone else to please other people. All right, cool. And then you grew up and maybe you started to read some books, right? Maybe you read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, right? Maybe you read Influence by Robert Cialdini, or The 48 Laws of Power, right? Robert Greene. And then you start to think, like, maybe be yourself is horrible advice, right? Like, wow, that actually sounds like stupid when I can clearly just speak and behave in an instrumental way to get some outcomes, maybe some social outcomes that I want in my life, right? Like, now I read these books, right? And I have this knowledge of things that I can do, little tactics and little strategies that I can implement in social situations that are gonna get me my desired outcome. So, like, shouldn't I just do that? Like, what is this? Like, be yourself? What the fuck is that? Like, just some stupid, like, hippie shit that they tell kids? Like, you know? So maybe you're confused about that. Maybe you're at a point where you feel like you're calculating your social interactions to the point where they're sort of losing their essence. And maybe you actually feel like you're losing touch, like, socially with people, and you're struggling to connect, and you feel like people can sense that you're not really connecting and that you're maybe being a little bit too performative or instrumental with your use of language and just your interaction in general. So maybe you're just a little bit confused about that. You feel like you maybe swung to one side of the spectrum of just really performative behavior in social situations, and you're thinking, have I swung a little bit too far? Maybe I do need to be myself a little bit more, but how do I manage that? How do I balance all of this knowledge that I have of, things that I can do in social interactions to get what I want versus just actually just showing up as myself? And maybe that's just a little bit confusing of a line to thread. If it is, you're not alone, because I know a lot of people that face this exact same issue. And so what we're going to talk about today is authenticity. So I'm going to start by defining what I mean by authenticity in this video. Right? So you can think about authenticity as the match between your internal intentions, motivations, desires, and feelings, and your external behaviors, mannerisms, and communications. Right? So the higher the consistency between these two things, the more authentic you're being. I want to add a quick corollary to this as well, because I think it can get complex quite rapidly. So when I talk about your internal intentions, motivations, desires, feelings, etc., I don't just mean the ones that you are conscious of. Okay, like, let's be clear about this, because there's a ton of these internal drives that you have that are actually subconscious, right? They're in your subconscious mind and you're not aware of them. So I just want to say it's possible to be unaware, misguided, or even just flat out wrong about what your internal desires actually are. Like, you might think that they are one thing in your conscious brain, and after maybe acting them out and trying to get them, you realize that that's not really what you wanted and you were after something else all along. And you just didn't know because it was deeper in your brain. It was under a layer, right, of this false desire that you had. And the real desire was just in your subconscious and you were unaware of it, right? So I just want to get that out of the way. It's possible and very, very common for that to happen, right? And so the degree to which you're authentic does still depend on the degree to which you are aligned with your realist intentions, right? And so realist doesn't just mean the ones that are in your conscious brain. It also means the ones in your subconscious that you're unaware of. And it's your duty to try to pull those out of your subconscious into your conscious mind, right? I've said this quote a dozen times in some of my videos, right? But it's a really good quote from Carl Jung, which is that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate, right? So I want to stress that authenticity isn't just about the coherence and congruence between your conscious thoughts, desires, feelings, and your actions. It's also about all of the ones in your unconscious. And those might even be more important, right? Your subconscious, rather. Those might even be more important because those probably govern way more of your actions. So how authentic you are depends on the alignment between your internal and external that I just described earlier. And that alignment itself is dependent on what Jung would call how integrated you are as a person, right? How well have you integrated those subconscious thoughts and desires and feelings and whatever, and brought them up and actually tried to integrate them into your conscious mind and made yourself aware of them. So my intention here is for you to leave by the end of the video, hopefully less confused about what authenticity is, but also understanding why it's actually really important, right? Now more than ever in our current society, but also just why it always has been important and how it will continue to be important for all of human time. And then also, obviously, how you can actually be more authentic yourself and how paradoxically this is actually how you're going to get everything, all your desired outcomes that you want right now out of your life. So I actually think that there hasn't been another time when authenticity has been as important and in demand as it is right now, right? With the way that technology has expanded, the sheer volume of content that exists on the internet and that people consume every single day, right? And the degree to which a lot of that content is just performative, it's plastic, right? It's fake. And with more and more of that content being digested, I think the demand for authenticity has gone up a lot, right? And it's not because the supply of it necessarily has decreased in an absolute sense, because I don't think that the supply of authenticity has ever really been that big, right? I don't see a reason why, people used to be more authentic. Oh, back, during your parents' time, you're like, oh yeah, everyone was so authentic back then. I don't think that that's the case, right? I think that authenticity has always been in short supply, because just naturally human beings have this desire to conform, right? And to be a part of a tribe and etc. And we're going to do and say things to try and make that happen, right? So I think that it's more that the relative supply of authenticity has decreased, right? So the amount of content that is produced now has gone like this. It's a lot, right? And so that little bit of authenticity that used to just stay within maybe like a little town or something, and this authenticity was compared to the other people in the town. So there's like 150 people and a couple of them are authentic. And so, the relative supply now is dramatically different. The number of people who are authentic hasn't gone up, but the amount of interactions that you have with people and parasocial interactions that you have with influencers or whatever on the internet has gone up dramatically, right? And so as a result, I think the demand for authenticity has never really been higher. So I'm not going to beat the drum too hard because I think you already know this and feel this, but more and more creators are just doing and saying more outrageous, polarizing, cringy, obscene, and just silly things on the internet, right, to get views. And that's on the parasocial side, on the internet side. But then also day to day, I feel like interactions with people are getting a little bit more superficial. So I think the result of this is that when we meet people that actually are authentic and they're not trying in a social interaction, they're just being, right? Like there's a difference there. When we pick something like that up, we actually feel, pretty drawn to that person because we're like, hey, this is a breath of fresh air, like in this sea of inauthentic, strange, performative things that are going on the internet, where you really can't tell if a person is being ironic or well, who they even really are, to be honest, right? There are a lot of creators on the internet where you're not even sure what this person is actually like, right? And what they actually value. So anyway, when you meet a person who is just being and they're just unapologetically themselves, right, you actually feel pretty drawn to that person because that is a stark contrast to what you're probably used to seeing on the internet. You're used to seeing either people just being performative and just saying outrageous, cringy, or polarizing things, and at the same time, those same people will be showing their best sides of their life, right? Through social media, we already know this. So you get all of that, and that compared to actual authenticity, you think, wow, okay, I'm really actually drawn to this person who is just showing up as themselves. Another way that we can look at why authenticity is important and why it continues to be important is through an evolutionary psychology lens, right? So you can think, why is authenticity selected for? why is it an adaptive trait? And you can kind of extrapolate this out, right? It makes sense. You can think if, you're in a group setting, and let's say our ancestors are in a group survival setting, we're out in the jungle, we're fighting for our lives, whatever. It's important to maintain the survival of the group actually depends on everyone being real and truthful with each other. And those ancestors those groups of people that weren't able to detect deception within the group, if you're trying to deceive me and I'm not able to tell, then I'm probably gonna die, right? You might tell me, oh, Chris, there's a boar like over here behind that bush, let's go and kill it together. And then I go behind the bush to check and there's a lion and I get fucking eaten. And maybe you did that because I have a stash of food that you wanted or some shit like that, right? So you get the point, which is that the groups that weren't able to really tell what other people's motivations were and how aligned they were with the actions of that person, they probably died out much more obviously than the groups that were able to tell, no, you're deceiving me here. Or I can tell that this person's acting strange, they're acting funny in the group, they have different motivations that are not aligned with ours, let's kick them out, right? So that's an interesting way to look at, well, how did we actually evolve to select for something like this? And this sort of goes without saying, but if you're more authentic, obviously you will have a higher perceived sense of well-being in yourself, right? Because obviously if there's more alignment between your internal thoughts and monologue and feelings and whatever and your external behaviors, there's more psychological consistency in your life, and that's going to bring about more feelings of peace and of well-being. And of course, the more you're being performative and calculating your social interactions and all these kind of things, the more there's just constant fatigue, right? Psychological fatigue from just constantly having to self-monitor your actions and be super conscious of what you're saying. Like, that's going to be tiring, right? And so that is going to have a detriment on your well-being as well, of course. You might be thinking, well, Chris, if it's so obvious, like if being authentic is so obviously better, then why do we play these strange social games, right? Where we try to be other people for acceptance of the group. And didn't you say that authenticity was better for acceptance of the group because of the whole Evo Psych explanation? I get it, it's confusing, okay? But it's strange because there's this weird game theory that goes on when human beings get into groups, right? I mean, this is just what I think. When we get into groups, we behave so differently, than we do one-to-one. We start to play these strange performative games. And the moment someone in a group starts playing the performative social game, the group game, everybody else kind of needs to now start to play it, right? And so if you get a whole bunch of people together who are all now playing this game of trying to be accepted by one another, that's where you feel like it's difficult to be yourself and you feel like you need to be someone else to be accepted by this group, right? And that's the pull. That's the huge pull of needing the human desire for acceptance by the group. Acceptance from, you don't want to be separated from the tribe and left out in the cold to die, right? That's a deep instinct that you have. And so when human beings get into groups and we play these strange now social interactions that are now group-based and we're trying to please many people, and so the things that we need to do to please different people end up in this amalgamation of we need to be something that's entirely not ourselves, because if we're ourselves, we're going to piss off this person's going to like us, but this person's not. But sometimes your brain just does it runs the calculation, right? And goes, look, if we're ourselves, maybe 1 out of these 10 people are actually going to like us and accept us. But if we put on this persona, right, then 9 out of 10 of them are gonna like us and accept us. So it's simple math. Like, we've run the calculation, bro. Like, be your persona, right? That's gonna get you more acceptance. And so without knowing, sometimes our brain does that calculation and we spend so much time as a persona that we lose touch with what we actually care about, what our internal drives, motivations are, and we're letting all of that be mimetic. Right? What am I studying at university? Well, I don't know. My parents said to do this. I want their acceptance, therefore I'm doing this. What kind of job am I going to do? Well, what do people think is a good job? What looks prestigious? What's acclaimed? Okay, people are going to respect me if I work for a bank or something. Okay, I'm going to go and do that. Oh, it's good money. People are going to respect me if I have money. this is what happens, right? We just lose touch entirely with what our internal drives actually are, and we just map them based on completely mimetic desires. We've talked about this before in a previous video. So that's the rough sort of lay of the land, right? Diagnosis of the problem. So let's get into the prescriptions. You might be thinking, how can I change to be more authentic, right? And that's quite an ironic question if you think about it. I actually think that you need to invert the thinking with that question and think, how have I already changed to conform to social pressures and to the acceptance of people around me and desires of other people, right? Like Robert Greene in his book Mastery calls this counterforce, right? It's all of the external pressures that conspire to push you in a certain direction that really isn't your own, and it wasn't your own decision, right? So it's useful to think, how have I already changed as a result of my environment and the pressures of my environment, and how have I been suppressing what I actually want and what I actually care about, right? That's how you can kind of flip this question, because it's not about changing more, it's actually about undoing all of the changes and all of the conditioning that has been layered on top of who you actually are and what you actually care about. So paradoxically, to try to be more authentic, you need to simply stop trying, right? You need to actually just let go, right? In Taoism, this will be called Wu Wei, which is basically the art of effortless action, right? Think about it as sailing instead of rowing, right? So if you're trying to be more authentic, then you're missing the point, because the point is to not try. You shouldn't be trying to do anything, trying to change some element of your existence. Just being is the whole point. There are some objections that some of you are going to have with this, which is, well, Chris, being more of myself, that sounds horrible. I don't even like myself, right? I actually think that I'm a loser right now. So why do I want to be more of that, right? So this is an interesting problem. It actually is, right? It is difficult to be authentic when you don't like yourself, right? So we need to solve for that first, right? We need to think, what elements of you do you dislike and would you want to actually discard, right? Because you are actually malleable as a human being, right? You can decide what you're going to identify with, what parts of you you're going to keep and continue identifying with, and what parts of you think, no, you know what, I actually don't like that I'm like this, I would like to change this thing, I'm going to discard this, I'm not going to identify with it, right? So we need an idea, we need a picture of what it is that we want to keep and what it is that we want to discard, and what does that look like across time, right? Who are you right now trying to become in some sense, right? Because I want to stress as well that human beings exist across time. You're not just a slice in the whole expanse of time. You exist now and then tomorrow and then next week, next month, next year, etc., right? So what is authentic to you right now, right? You might say, well, right now I don't like who I am, but that's fine, because if you have a picture of who you are becoming and what you're trying to do, the person that you're trying to be, your actions, doing the actions of that future version of you is still authentic to you. That is still authentic because that is you. You exist across time, right? And so it's not just about, well, right now I don't like who I am, and so I can't be authentic because I don't like these parts of myself. Stop identifying with those parts, right? Realize that, okay, I can do away with that. If I don't like the fact that I'm, not as disciplined, or I'm lazy, and all these kind of things, I can change those things. It's not authentic to me to be lazy, okay? This is the point that I'm trying to make. It is not the traits of you that you are identifying with that the simple identification with them makes it authentic. No, right? It's not about that. But it's about, what are your real desires? What really drives you? What are your intentions? What motivates you, right? As long as you have that and you can bring that into your conscious mind and you act from that place, right? And so that's you right now and who you're trying to become. as long as you're acting from that place, you are being authentic. So again, what this comes back to is introspection. It comes back to what we talked about at the start of the video with Carl Jung, talking about integrating, right? Integrating the personality. The parts of you that are in your subconscious that kind of lay dormant in the sense that you're unaware of them, but they are still active in the sense that they're controlling your actions and the way that you think and the way that you operate, the way that you treat other people. Uncovering these things and actually asking yourself intelligent questions about, like, what do I actually care about? And why do I care about these things, right? Carl Jung used to say there's this alchemical dictum, which was in sterquilinis invenitur, right? Which is Latin for in filth it will be found. So it's in the dark recesses of your subconscious where you might actually find what has been motivating you this entire time. And if you can integrate that, you can be a way more authentic version of yourself, right? I'll give you an example. There's plenty of people who find themselves in the situation of, well, okay, I want to make a shit ton of money. Okay, why do you want to make so much money? Well, because I want to have a really nice, lavish lifestyle, right? I want to drive a really fast car. I want to drive a Lamborghini. Okay, why do you want to drive a Lamborghini? Well, because, you know, other people like fast cars and they're going to look at me and they're going to think that I'm high status and whatever. Okay, why do I want other people to perceive me as high status? And you just keep going down and you might find that, you know, it's because you were bullied as a kid, right? And your status, your idea of yourself was so heavily affected because of all that bullying that now you're trying to overcompensate by, you know, being really high status. Again, I'm not generalizing. I'm not saying that this is why most people want to make money or anything, but I'm saying that people have done this process and come to these realizations, right? That they're being driven by something that's actually pretty ugly, right? They didn't get enough validation as a kid, right? And that makes them overcompensate and seek that validation externally, right? So these things exist, right? That's my entire point of saying this, is that you're only going to figure out what your real internal intentions and motivations are by doing this introspection. And there's no way around that. But the good thing is that once you understand yourself better and you integrate these things, you can be more unapologetically yourself because you have a better understanding of yourself. And again, paradoxically, I really think that this is how you actually get whatever your desired outcome is in life. Because we think that by behaving in a certain way, we're going to be perceived by others in a certain way, and we're doing all this extra work, right, to try to be accepted by the group. But ultimately, I think about the people that I respect and love the most, and these people are so brutally, unapologetically themselves, and they are not trying to hide anything. They, you know, hard on the sleeve, they pour everything out on the table. Not in a, you know, like emotionally dumping sense, but I just mean there's no double speak there. There's no, oh, well, they said one thing, but I need to like try to interpret what they said in a different, like I need to do all this extra work to try and figure out what their real intentions are. Like, no, boom, you can take them at face fucking value. They're just themselves, and they're like, dude, like, deal with it. I mean, if you don't like it, like, dude, that's cool, like, you know, see you, like, you know, they're just themselves. So strangely enough, those are the people that end up getting the most, you know, acceptance in the end, or not the most in quantity maybe, but the most in quality. And I think that's the huge difference here, which is that, and yeah, you know what, this is really the 80-20. This is just, if you could have one takeaway from this video, just let it be this. When you're authentic, what you lose in quantity of acceptance, you gain back in spades in quality of acceptance. Wow, I almost screwed that up. Let's try again. What you lose in quantity of acceptance, you gain back in quality of acceptance. Okay, so you might have, I don't know, fewer friends if you're being more authentic, but the depth of connection that you will have with those few people is extraordinary. Anyway, I feel like I've waffled for long enough, so I hope this video has served you. And if you're interested in these sorts of conversations and discussions like this, and you want to be around more guys that are thinking about these things and actually expressing themselves more authentically, consider joining the Winner's Circle. That's my private community of guys in there. It's it's really amazing. We're doing some fun things in April. We have a challenge going on right now. And yeah, I just really love the direction the community is going in. And yeah, everybody in there is actually being really authentic, and I love that. So if you do too, consider joining. And if not, I'll see you in the next video. Like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you thought about this video. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.